What's going on, everybody? Nick from the Sound Coop here, and I apologize for being out of touch for the last month, but I took possession of my first ever custom ordered electric guitar, and I basically have been lost down a rabbit hole for the last month. So anyway, this is a Falx III by Arles Guitars. These are made by my buddy Matt. This is actually my second Falx III. I bought another one maybe 10 months ago from Matt. He made a run of 4 guitars, and this is one of the original 4 that was made. He was kind enough to lend me all 4 of the first run, plus the prototype, and I actually demoed those in a separate YouTube video that I made 9 or 10 months back. I'll link that down below. But this is the one that I bought out of the first 4 guitars. And I fell in love with this thing so much, I had to put in a custom order. So this one's a 25.5-inch scale length. I'm gonna do a video on this one pretty soon. But since I just took possession of this custom guitar, I wanted to make a video on this one first. So anyway, this is a 24.75-inch scale length. So more like a Gibson, whereas the blue one's a little bit more like a Fender in terms of the scale length. But this thing is pretty darn cool. I'm gonna give you guys some sound examples, and while I'm doing that, I'll give you guys some nice close-up pictures so you can see some of the beautiful detail work that Matt did here. And then once we get done with that, I'll go over all the specs, cost, and just some of the things I love about this guitar. And I'll also point out one small issue that I've had with this guitar. Not a very major issue by any means at all, but just one small thing that I noticed in terms of something that people should be aware of, you know, if they're interested in a guitar like this. So anyway, let's get into it. So all the tones you just heard came from a set of Fralin modern PAFs. I'm really loving these pickups, and I think getting a set of PAFs was crucial for this custom build. The two things that I kind of was hoping Matt could achieve with this is, first off, I wanted him to build something that would put me off buying a Les Paul or a 335. I have both of those guitars on my list to buy for the collection, and I wanted to see if he could do something that would kind of put me off buying those guitars for the foreseeable future, and he completely delivered. The other thing that I wanted was I wanted a tuxedo vibe, like a white and black tuxedo vibe, white paint, black binding, rosewood board, and then white binding on the neck, and he completely delivered. Not only did he do a great job on the binding, but he also found this like checkered binding, and he sent me like 4 or 5 different options when he found it. He said, hey, we can do the black binding, but do you want to put some like checkered vibes on the inside of the black binding? And here's a couple options. Let me know if you like any of this. And so I thought they all looked really cool. I just kind of picked the one that I thought would look best on the guitar, and so that's what we went with. Now, another cool thing regarding the tuxedo vibe, Matt built 4 guitars, like I said, in the Fender scale length, and then built 4 guitars in the Gibson scale length. So he has 8 guitars basically built for his company. And each of the guitars that he's built all have a serial number, right? So the first 4 guitars were 1 through 4. I knew the back 4 guitars were going to be 5 through 8. And it occurred to me that 007 is a serial number in there. This guitar is 001. This guitar is 007. So I just kind of reached out when he was building it and I said, hey, if you haven't picked the serial numbers yet, would you be cool with giving me the 007 serial number? And that way it's like an extra cool matching of the tuxedo vibe. So 007, licensed to kill Gibsons. I'm completely in love with this guitar. So let's just go through all the specs, and you know, I'll try to show you guys some more close-up pictures as I go through everything to kind of point out what I'm talking about. But yeah, let's check it out. All right, let's start with the headstock and work our way down. So as far as the aesthetics of the headstock, it's got a little bit of a Firebird vibe. It looks to me like it's a little bit wider and a little bit taller than a Firebird headstock, but it has the same orientation of the reverse tuners. If you haven't seen my original video going over Matt's first 4 guitars, I kind of pointed this out in that video. The reverse orientation is not just cool looking, but I love the physics of it. It makes the bass strings more taut and the treble strings more slinky compared to if the orientation was reversed, like a Strat or a Telecaster. And I just like that. It feels really cool. It has like a nice stiffness to the bass and a nice slinkiness for doing bends on the treble strings. So that's like a cool physics thing that I noticed playing these guitars. I really think the reverse orientation is kind of the vibe. I mean, don't get me wrong, as a longtime Strat guy, I don't mind it oriented the other way, but this produces a way cooler feel, and I really, really like that. Anyway, two-tone headstock. I really love that as well. We got a nice piece of 4A flamed roasted maple on this thing. I mean, this neck is just gorgeous. It's a true piece of 4A. Just the 3D nature and the striping is unbelievable. And it has some really cool like grain lines. On my other guitar, the grain lines are very straight. These ones are very wavy and circular. I just love the aesthetic of it. It looks really cool. Very, very nice. So we got white binding. All the binding is PVC-A. It's basically an old school plastic. And I'll get into that more when we get down to the body. We got a bone nut. We got a rosewood fretboard. We have gold mother of pearl inlays. These inlays are super cool. In some angles, they look white, and in other angles, they show off that sort of gold effect, and it kind of just depends on what the angle of reflection is. Really, really nice 3D quality. I typically don't like flashy and gaudy guitars, but this thing is just too beautiful. We got medium jumbo frets. The fretwork is exquisite. All of the tip ends are just ball rolled. Beautiful work. The binding is all rolled. I can't feel any like rough edges on the binding or the frets at all whatsoever. And another cool thing about like the neck binding, it doesn't look like it's been rolled. You know, like on some guitars, like my Taylor, for instance, I have a really nice Taylor acoustic. You can see just looking down the binding where they took something sharp and flat like a razor and basically just scraped all the hard edges flat, but it doesn't look like they rolled it on the Taylor. This all looks perfectly rolled. Like you can't see any flat edges or machining marks or anything, just straight A+ binding work. So anyway, really, really nice. As far as the body, we have a 50-year-old piece, 50+-year-old piece of recycled mahogany. This piece actually came salvaged out of a local building, and the building was over 50 years old. So 50-year+ piece of mahogany. Matt chambers these things. I'll show you guys a picture of sort of where the chambering occurs in the body. I had asked him how much of the body he's routing out. I had guessed 30%. He said it's probably closer to 34 or 35%, but it leaves the weight of this thing really nice. So this thing is 7.69 pounds. This is the second lightest guitar that I own. My Novo is 7.12 pounds. So this is a little bit more than a half-pound difference. Extremely light, but also very balanced. There's no heavy body or heavy neck. It just has a nice, perfect center weight. So I really love that. Of course, we went with the stop tail and the Tune-O-Matic. Now, as far as the Soundhole, this is the first out of the 8 guitars that Matt has made with the Soundhole. So this is like a prototype to some degree or another, and I really love it. It's got a cool shape, kind of reminiscent of like the Rickenbacker thing. I know a lot of like boutique companies nowadays have sort of taken that Rickenbacker vibe and kind of made it their own. Matt did something very similar to that. Really cool. Now I realize with Matt being a friend of mine, it makes me potentially less objective, but you know, I'll just point out the only issue that I've had with this guitar. I mean, it's basically flawless minus this one small thing, and it is pretty much a small thing. This Soundhole, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's the depth or how big the hole is or if it's the shape of the hole itself, but it kicks back like a resonant harmonic when certain notes are played. So let me just see if I can hear that. When I cut the note short, there's like bing, bing. Same thing with the G. Yeah, that one's a little bit higher pitched. But anyway, I can't hear this in the pickups at all. And I played this thing for probably 3 weeks before I even noticed it because I was listening through an amp or I was playing through headphones. So if you have an amp going, you won't notice that at all. It's just something I picked up when I was playing it acoustically one day, and I don't really play it acoustic, so it doesn't really bother me at all. But one thing to consider if you're interested in getting one with the Soundhole. Now, I have brought this up to Matt, and he hasn't heard it yet, so I'm curious to see if he has any thoughts on like maybe how to mitigate that. But it's not an uncommon problem. I mean, you're gonna have resonant frequencies if you have a sound hole. And I think something like an F hole, because of its shape, is gonna be less susceptible to resonant frequencies, where something like the Rickenbacker style hole, where it's larger, is gonna be more susceptible. So that's just my take on it. Again, it's not even like a problem at all, but it is just one small thing that I've noticed. Aside from that, this guitar is completely flawless. You know, the sound hole has a triple binding. It's a black, white, black kind of a thing. Absolutely beautiful. The binding work that Matt did on this whole guitar is just crushing, just absolutely out of the park. So PVC-A on all the bindings, same thing here. The front side of the guitar is actually double bound. It has, like I said, that checkered striped, that's an inside inlay. And then on the outside of that, Matt puts the black PVC-A. And he does this all with the old school technique. He doesn't use any glue. He uses like a liquid acetate to basically, I think emulsify is the word he used, but I think what that means is it's basically liquefying the plastic binding momentarily, which allows the binding itself to adhere to the wood. So no glue. He basically puts the binding in the channel, uses heat to make it fit form the channel at its resting state, and then he uses that liquid acetate to basically glue the binding in there or adhere the binding in there. So cool old school vibes, and all of the work is just cherry, front, back, sound hole, and neck. Just gorgeous binding, very smooth. You can't see any tooling marks or anything. It's just flawless. And he has some nice bends. Like it kind of bends here where the German carve is and drops down a little bit. It just all looks really clean. But yeah, regarding the German carve, this is probably the coolest German carve I've ever seen. And I'm kind of curious to see if anybody knows of other companies that do this. I talked to Matt and he's not aware of any, although it's totally possible. But I love how when the carve comes around here, it is actually included where the knobs are. So the knobs are recessed down, not quite half the height of the knob, but pretty close. So it kind of drops the knobs out of your strumming height. I had a buddy try my other one that's a big Les Paul guy, and he loved the fact that the knobs were recessed slightly. So I'm curious if anybody knows of another company that does, like a German carve like this, where the knobs are included in the carve. Regardless, really cool, really slick looking, really clean. The way he ties the carve back in here is really nice. I just love how the carve sort of changes depending on what side of the body it's on. So if you guys know of anybody else that does this sort of recess thing, let me know in the comments. I think both Matt and I are curious to know. Now, as far as the paint and finish, we basically got like a vintage Olympic white here. And all of the finishes that Matt has been using to date are all nitro finishes. So I think one difference between this finish and the finish on his first round is the first round of guitars were sort of made to have like a very fresh new look, no relicking, no finish checking, nothing like that, but just using vintage materials. On the second round, after a little bit of talking, I kind of convinced Matt to try some Relic Work. And so he basically did a lot of experimenting with different mixtures of nitro finishes to see which one responded best to get the sort of finish checking look that he wanted. And after a lot of experimenting, he was able to settle on a mixture and it came out great. Now, as far as the checking method, he freezer checks all these. So he's not using a heat gun and a can of compressed air. He's actually painting them, finishing them, and then setting the bodies in a freezer for a certain period of time, depending on how much checking he wants from the finish. The checking work on this is exquisite. Very, very natural looking. I have a lot of guitars with finish checking, and this one is definitely one of the more natural looking ones. I mean, to me, this looks as natural as my Fender Custom Shop or my Gibson Murphy Lab. I love the Relic Work on the Novo, and it looks really cool, but to me, it doesn't have sort of the vintage, erraticness that like normal checking does. The Novo checking, the lines are all very straight, and it almost looks like it might have been done with a razor. And I don't know, it may have. Maybe it's just the way Fano mixes up the formula, but the lines are a lot more uniform on the Novo, whereas on this, it's way more erratic. And he was able to not only get the body finish to check, but he was able to get the wood areas on the actual neck to check too. So like if you look at a lot of vintage Fenders, I think with the exception of 1 or 2 years the nitro on the necks doesn't really crack. And I don't know why that is specifically, maybe something with the mixture, but he was able to get some nice cracking on the nitro that's on the wood sections too, and it looks really, really cool. So this would be kind of like a closet classic sort of a vibe. There's no like beat up areas or places where he like took the paint off or like put dings or dents, nothing like that. Basically, the only relic work is just the finish checking. That, and he also sanded the neck back here. I'll see if I can get like a picture of this, but it's actually really kind of hard to see, but I really love it. Like, first off, I have to say, out of all of my guitars with nitro neck finishes, this one has the smoothest finish in areas where there's tons of nitro. Like, the nitro can tend to be sticky. It's like that on my Novo. I mean, this is a little bit sticky, but it's way smoother than my Novo or my Custom Shop Strat or my Murphy Lab. And you know, Novo actually, and same thing with the Fender, Novo and Fender, they peel back all of the finish in sort of the play area on the neck. And I really love that. So even though the finish is a little sticky on my Novo, you don't actually notice it in any of the play areas because they've sanded it back. And the back of the Novo neck is unbelievably smooth. Matt did something here that just kind of takes that up to a whole other level. Just the whole feel of this sanded down area is just glass smooth. Even the areas where there is a little bit of finish are not as sticky as like a typical nitro. So I don't know if that's like a buffing thing or him sanding it down, but out of all the guitars that I have with nitro necks and nitro finishes, this is the smoothest, cleanest looking one that I've seen to date. So really like exquisite work as far as all that sort of stuff goes. Just beautiful. Now inside of the control cavity here, instead of doing like a typical wiring setup, he's actually using a PC board. Now, this is one of those things where when Matt and I first talked about it, I didn't really like the idea at all. To me, it just seems like something that might cause a higher rate of failure. But he's having these boards custom built, he's getting them sourced from a really good place, and he assures me that they will outlast me and the guitar. So I'm definitely curious to put that to the test, but he sort of put to bed all of my concerns that I had when he was initially wiring these things up with PC boards. And obviously, I mean, everything sounds great here. I think part of the reason why he wanted to do PC boards is he wanted to experiment with some different options. So what this is right here is it's a variable adjustable boost. So this thing will give you somewhere around 12 dB of boost, and you can adjust it with the trim pot that's back here in the cavity. I'll show you guys a little picture of you know, what the PC board looks like. But I guess the cool thing is this is not only a boost, it's also a low end roll off. So in my other guitar, in my 001 Arles, I have this thing set up with about a 6 dB boost, and then it also rolls off the low end. In this guitar, I don't have this thing set up for a boost at all. It's not boosting any volume. So all I'm doing is I'm using it as an EQ. And I really, really like this. So just check this out. I'll do a little before and after. We'll put this thing in the neck position so it's nice and chunky. And I'm just gonna play 4 notes, and then I'll just flip this thing on. So this is the boost off, and this is the boost on. So of course, this is 9-volt powered, and I'll be honest, that might put some people off. Before I got this guitar, I was completely against putting 9 volts in electric guitars. I'd previously had an LTD with some EMG pickups that were active. I didn't like it at all. It just was not my vibe. So I don't know, I wasn't really feeling it, but as soon as I tried out this boost switch, both as an EQ and as a boost, I was instantly in love. I love using amp distortion. I love using boost pedals in front of an amp. I'm not really into overdrive pedals. So there's nothing I love more than taking a boost and smashing a good tube amp with it. And it's nice to be able to have that built right into the guitar. So really cool just to be able to flip that thing down if I want to go for a lead. And not only get a little more push if I want it, but it'll also do that kind of a thing that like a tube screamer or a Klon will do, which is to roll off those lows. A lot of people like to use those pedals not as overdrives, but as boosts, because when they're boosting the signal, they're also rolling off the lows, so your amp isn't getting like overly chunky or muddy. Anyway, it's nice that he's built that feature in there. I think this thing rolls off somewhere around 160 hertz. So it's not too low. You can still keep bass in there, but it's also nice for just making your amp a little bit less flubby when you're doing your boosting. So anyway, I will say Matt is very flexible, I think, in terms of like custom builds. So if you're interested in checking out one of his guitars, I'm sure he'd be willing to wire it up in just a vintage way. I don't think that he's requiring guys who want custom builds to get PC boards. So if you want vintage wiring, Matt's competent as far as doing that, no problems at all. I think this is just something that he's experimenting with in terms of what's the best route to go. So as far as like the playability, which I guess is the only thing I haven't addressed, this thing is A+. The best playing guitar that I have is my Novo Cirrus. And there's something about the action. I don't know what it is about Dennis Fano, but he can get the lowest action out of any guitar that I've played. And as far as like the second lowest action and playability, my Mulecaster and my Murphy Lab Junior were sort of the best second playing guitars that I had compared to the Novo. And this thing sits right in with the Mulecaster and the Murphy Lab. I mean, he hasn't got this quite as low as Fano is able to get his, but this thing is, pretty on the deck in terms of action. I can't get any of my Strats or Telecasters to set up this low. So unbelievable playability, unbelievable quality. So anyway, I'll put a link to Matt's website down below. I'll put a link to his YouTube page and his Instagram. I'll also put a link to his Reverb. If you guys are interested in his guitars, he puts them up there for sale as he builds them. I think there's 5 of them up there right now. And man, there is some really, really cool designs. Whoever gets that green one he's got up there is really gonna luck out with a beautiful guitar. Whoever gets that gold top is gonna luck out. Whoever gets that burgundy is gonna luck out. I had a hard time picking between the burgundy one and this Pelham blue one. And I ended up going with the Pelham blue, but that burgundy one with that Duesenberg bridge is gorgeous. Anyway, all around a pretty amazing guitar, especially considering the price. This thing was $2,400. My other one was $19. Matt had it priced at $2,000, but he didn't have to ship it and I didn't want a case for the first one. So I got that one for $19. That's a steal as far as I'm concerned. This fully spec'd custom order for $2,400 is also a steal. And if you're pricing something guitar-wise around $2,000, that's competitively in range with like a nice American Gibson or a nice American Strat. This thing absolutely will blow an American Strat or American Gibson out of the water. This thing plays better than my custom shop Strat. So very competitive in terms of like the value you're getting for the dollar. I got my Novo in 2019 before everything went crazy. That thing was like $2,800, which was a really good deal. Nowadays those guitars are going for closer to $35. My Murphy Lab was $4,500. I got that used. I think that's a pretty good deal, but again, a ridiculous sum of money. My custom shop Fender was $3,000. I also got that used. I love that guitar. Totally worth every penny, but that's also a lot of money to spend. As far as I'm concerned, this was kind of an easy decision. I mean, it's, comparatively not that much compared to most of the other boutique guitar companies or like custom shop stuff from the more well-known brands. So anyway, hope you guys like this little rundown of this new instrument. I'm pretty happy with it. If you guys have any questions, get at me in the comments. And if you guys like the video, please do like and subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I'm going to put links to all of Matt's website, his Reverb page where he sells his guitars. I'll put a link to his YouTube and his Instagram. Check him out. And if you have any questions for him, he's a really nice guy. I'm sure he'll answer any questions you guys have. And yeah, I'm going to do another video on my 001 serial Arles. And I'll probably release these things, maybe back to back within like a week of each other. I just wanted to do this one first because I just got it and I'm so jazzed about it. My other Arles is also a really nice guitar and I want to make a impressions video on that one too. So stay tuned for that. I'll see you guys again soon.